Spicing up grilled asparagus. Well, first of all, Narcio Nick, what a great idea. Um, and it's a great way to save money is to cook vegetables. Um, th- Asparagus is absolutely at its best on the grill. You can steam it, you can boil it, but it never better than when you grill it. And you get a little char on it. What I typically do is toss it in a little oil first, and then hit it with a spice blend. I have a blend of herbs called Simon and Garfunkel because it's parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, and a few other goodies. And we make a poultry rub, which is mostly herbs, and hit it with that. Then I grill it. And you want to be careful about the tips because they will char really fast. So you kind of hang the tips off the edge of the grill so they don't char or they don't burn. But a little char is nice. And then after they're done, you can take them off even before you put the meat on because they're great at room temp. And I hit them with a drizzle of a really good olive oil and balsamic vinegar. And a good balsamic vinegar, even a cheap one, you can condense it by simmering it, boiling it down, and then some shredded Parmigiano Reggiano, some real Parmesan cheese. Hey, we're at official start time, so it's time for me to roll out the launch music. And then I'll finish my talk on asparagus, and then away we go.
I need ribs to ease my day. I need to find time to cook them right. My papa said, can't hurry ribs. You just have to wait. He said ribs.
And now, at your service, here to help you cook and eat like royalty is the barbecue whisperer and hedonism evangelist from AmazingRibs.com, the planet's biggest and baddest barbecue and grilling website, Meathead.
Boiled slabs must I stand before I find the crunch to let me live again. Right now the only thing that keeps me hanging on is a memory of smoking it down to the bone. I remember Papa said you can't hurry.
Okay, here we go. Well, we're back. We were just chatting before we got started. Somebody asked a really good question about tips for asparagus, and I was talking about that, and I'll continue. So I like to hit it with a little olive oil and then an herb blend. I think it's best with herbs, but you can use a pork rub if you want, something with a little sweetness in it. I don't think it's necessary. And then after it's grilled, you want to shoot for a little char marks, pull it off, hit it with a little bit of really good extra virgin olive oil, and then balsamic vinegar. Now, if you can afford the top-end balsamics, which are almost a syrup, go for that. But if you can't, you can take inexpensive grocery store balsamic, put it in a saucepan on a simmer temp, and cook it down, and it cooks down to a syrup. Now, you got to watch it carefully, because if you get it too hot or you cook it too fast, it can turn to gummy and then into candy. Actually, it gets really thick. You can twirl it on a stick and make like a lollipop out of it. But you don't want to do this. You just want to make a nice, thick, drizzly, sweet syrup on the asparagus, and then shaved Parmigiano Reggiano. And I think that's just a classic way to do asparagus. And it's asparagus season now. It's I see Henry Hayes says he agrees with me. Thank you, Henry. Yeah, and I was saying, I think it's better on the grill than any other way you'd cook it. It's certainly better than steamed or boiled. And it's a little crunchy, and you can serve it at room temp. So I'll throw the asparagus on early, and when it's done, pull it off, and then the meat goes on. You know, if I'm cooking steaks, it's great with steaks. And let it just sit at room temp, and then you can even pick it up and eat it with your fingers. Now, here's interesting. A lot of people think that thick asparagus is inferior, and it's not. The issue is that there's a skin which can get woody. And if you buy asparagus, whether it's skinny asparagus or thick, chop off an inch at the bottom, because that's the woodiest. And if it's still kind of woody down there, you get your potato peeler and you shave it So you get down to the raw asparagus, if you will, the meat of the asparagus. And it's just as good on a thick piece as it is on a thin piece. And asparagus growers tell you the same thing. I'm not just saying this. It's just that you've got this woody outer layer that you want to get rid of. I think it's just a perfect thing to do at this time of year. Okay. Jim cooks it at 185 for 15 minutes in sous vide with butter and salt. Okay, now you're talking. But I still think, Jim, I got to argue with you. I love my sous vide systems, but I just think asparagus with a little char, with a little brown and black on the surface. And I was saying earlier, you got to watch the tips because they're skinny and they can burn. So what I'll do is I'll kind of hang them over the edge of the grill. Once they get a little color, I hang them over the edge of the grill so they don't blacken. And boy, they're good. I thought we'd start off tonight. If you're new to these little sessions, I've been doing these every month for a few years. And I usually start off with something of a monologue, if you will, in which I address a topic of interest. And boy, today everybody is sweating the price of meat and food in general. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about some things to do where you could possibly save some money. And one of my favorite things is meatloaf. Hey, meatloaf on the grill or the smoker is really good. And the beauty of meatloaf is you buy ground beef, and you can buy an inexpensive piece of ground beef, and you want to chop up some onions, some bell peppers, maybe even some cheese, mix it all in. You can go all beef or a beef and pork blend or a beef and pork and veal blend, although veal ain't cheap. And then you mix in some bread. Now you take day-old bread. This is the old Italian tradition, day-old bread, and soak it in milk or, if you wish, water. It's called a panade, and it's a filler. So it's a way of stretching the meat to save money. And it also adds moisture. You're going to squeeze most of it out. So you get some hunks, not bread crumbs, but hunks of meat, and toss them in some milk, let it soak it up, and then squeeze it out, rip it up, and mix it in with the meat. And then the other thing is don't put it in a loaf pan. A lot of people cook it in a loaf pan, and when it's in a loaf pan, the energy from the grill or the smoke flavor can't get through the sides, so you get nice browning on the surface. But you can't get any flavor into the sides. So it's much better to make your meatloaf into like a football shape so that the energy, the heat can enter from all sides. And you can either put it on a flat pan or on a flat tray or even on a piece of aluminum foil. Now you got to be careful. If you put it on too small a piece of foil, as it cooks, a lot of liquid's going to run out, fat's going to run out, it'll get into the fire. You'll have flare-ups, but if you have it on foil or if you have it on a pan, it should protect it against the flare-ups. Your bottom will get crispy, your edges will get brown, and if you put it in the smoker, you'll get a beautiful, beautiful, you want to use a digital thermometer, take it up to 155, which is where it's safe. And then if you want, you can glaze it. And we were just talking about using a reduced balsamic on asparagus. A reduced balsamic on your meatloaf is really nice, or barbecue sauce, or whatever else. You make a glaze. You can make it however you want. And boy, that is just really good. And that's an inexpensive meal. And if you've got company coming over, you can do 2 or 3 loaves, season them however you like. And everybody loves it. You can make sandwiches out of them. You can just serve it on a platter. And boy, that's good and tasty and inexpensive. Also, you can use the same technique and make meatballs. And they're great on the grill. You just roll them around on the grill till they get brown all over. And make them the same way. Use a panade. Soak the bread in water. Give it some good seasoning. If you want to give it a glaze, you can serve the meatballs on a pasta or meatball sandwiches. Meatball sandwiches. Now you're using a sub loaf. So you've got bread. Bread's filler. Now you've got a very inexpensive and delightful meal. Everybody loves meatballs, meatball sandwiches. What a great way to save some money. In fact, we're talking about ground meat. Sausages are ground meat. And in general, sausages tend to be less expensive. They're generally made from less desirable, tougher cuts of meat, so they're less expensive. And you can make them from tough cuts of meat because it's ground up. They're essentially pre-chewed, if you will. So ground beef, ground pork, sausages, and you can grind your own. You can make your own. I've got recipes for ground for making sausage. Also the meatloaf recipes. I have an Italian sausage meatloaf on our website that I've stuffed with cheese and peppers and onions. It's really nice. I roll it out flat, stuff it, and then roll it up. Check those out if you want to do a meatloaf. The Italian sausage meatloaf is really fun. And, you do Italian sausage sandwiches. Or just, my favorite sausage in the world is andouille. Do an andouille sandwich. And now you can chop up onions and bell peppers and put them on there. And you're putting it on a loaf. So you're putting it on a bread, which is filling. And bread's cheap still. Well, relatively compared to meats at least. So you're making a very delicious and filling meal that's pretty cheap. Another way to go, of course, is pizza. I mean, who doesn't love pizza? Now, there are on the market now about a half a dozen, maybe more, really great, inexpensive, and I say inexpensive, I'm talking under 500. Some of them are under 400. There's a couple down around 300 pizza ovens. And these are pizza ovens that perform just like the pizza ovens in a restaurant. They get really hot. They have a stone bottom, and the flame licks over the top. And those are the secrets. The trick to getting good pizza is getting the top and the bottom done at the same time. And these pizza ovens, I'm cooking on the Uni Carew 16 now. They sent me one to test, and I'm just head over heels in love with this thing. It's around $500, I think. I forget. But it is just totally awesome. And it gets up to 800-900 degrees. I don't cook at that temp, but you can make a real downtown pizza in 2 minutes or less. I'm not kidding. You roll out the dough, or you make the dough. You let it proof and ferment overnight. And then you pull it with your hands, and you get it into the right shape. You dress it with whatever you want. You don't want to use too much stuff on it, because if you've got a soft dough, it tends to stick to the peel. But for a margarita pizza, I did one last week that I had tasted in Fort Worth, in a restaurant in Fort Worth. It was a pizza with lomo, which is pork tenderloin that's been cured like ham. I used prosciutto instead because I couldn't find any lomo, although I've learned how to make it now, and I'm going to be making it and publishing my recipe. But you can use prosciutto and thin sliced green apple, manchego cheese, and a little sprinkle of celery salt. And no tomato sauce, nothing else. Man, that was good. Also, a recipe from a woman named Leah Eskin. Go visit her website, leaheskin.com. Leah Eskin, E-S-K-I, one word, leaheskin.com. She has a recipe for pizza where you lay down a pesto sauce base. There's, again, no tomato. You oil the dough, you lay down the pesto sauce, and then thin sliced lemons. You slice it thin and you cut it into quarters, and you sprinkle them all over there, and then hit it with a little more with oil. And my goodness, lemon and pesto on a pizza, it just blows me away. It was fantastic. But you can do your classic pizzas like your margarita pizza, which is your classic Neapolitan pizza. It's just tomato sauce, fresh mozzarella, buffalo mozzarella if you can get it, some Parmigiano Reggiano. Fantastic. And these new pizza ovens are awesome. But if you don't have a pizza oven and you don't want to get one, you can do this on your grill. A gas grill makes it really easy. You can do it on a charcoal grill too, but it's a little harder to manage the temp. And what you do is you get your dough ready, and you don't dress the dough. You just give it a light coat of oil, and you bring it out to your grill, and you put it oil side down, and you're basically toasting the bread. So you cook it that way until it firms up a little bit and gets golden on one side. Then you flip it, and now you have to have all your mise en place, your toppings all ready. So you've got your cheese, if you're going to put cheese on there, and it's all shredded or pulled into small chunks. You can. I like using shaved scallions. You don't want to get it too heavy, and you just tomato sauce, cheese, scallions, and sprinkle them on the top, which has just been cooked and is still warm. So it's going to melt some of the cheese, and then you close the lid, and it'll brown on the other side. Pull it in. Again, you can't go crazy with the toppings, and you don't want to put raw meat on there. No sausage. Now, if you're going to put sausage on there, you need to pre-cook it in a frying pan in the kitchen or on your side burner or on the grill, but you don't want to put raw meat on a pizza done this way. So pizza is really fun. Now, the thing is even on one of these fancy pizza ovens, you need to practice. It's tricky just getting it off the peel. The peel is this big paddle that pizza guys use, the pizzaiolas they're called, and it's this big paddle, and you make the pizza and you put it on the paddle, and then you have to shove it into the oven and onto the hot stones, and that's tricky. The way to do this is you sprinkle flour on the peel and get that peel coated with flour so the flour acts like ball bearings, or better still, use cornmeal, and that acts like a ball bearing also. And you lay the pizza on top of that, and you don't want to let it sit around on the peel for long, otherwise it soaks through and it starts to stick to the peel. So you get it onto the peel and you go straight to the cooker, and then what you do is you get the pizza right out to the front edge of the peel, sitting right on the front edge of the peel, and you insert the peel all the way to the back, and you don't push then pull. You insert it all the way to the back, and then you yank. It's just like pulling the tablecloth out from under the place settings. So you just yank it back, and the tip will grab hold of the hot stone and pull it right off, and away you go. It takes a little practice, and you might try it just with a piece. Hey, and the other thing it's cool is you can make your own dough, and we have recipes on AmazingRibs.com, and there's pizza websites out there like the Uni website, which is a pizza oven, that have great recipes for dough. But a lot of grocery stores now are selling pizza dough balls, and they're good. I've tried a couple of them from my local groceries, and they're just the classic Neapolitan style, yeast, flour, yeast, water, salt. Sometimes they put some other ingredients, some preservatives or sugar in there, but generally they're really good. And some pizza restaurants will actually sell you a dough ball. If you call them up and say, I want to buy a couple of dough balls, they may be puzzled by that request and they don't know what to charge you, and usually you can negotiate a good deal. Or they may have had this request before and they're happy to do so. So all kinds of fun ways. Pizza, now we're talking something really inexpensive to cook that everybody loves. And then the last thing I wanted to suggest that is kind of fun is salmon patties, salmon burgers. Now, if you can get fresh salmon, these farm-grown salmon. Now, it used to be farm-grown salmon. Stay away from it, evil. It pollutes the water. The salmon jump the net and get out and crossbreed with the wild salmon and stuff. There was so much negative publicity around farm-grown salmon that the salmon farms have really cleaned up their act. Now, I'm sure there's a few rogues still out there, but in general, it's my belief that they have cleaned up their act a lot from what I'm hearing from people who monitor this sort of thing, like the Monterey Aquarium and the others, and that farmed salmon is done a lot more ethically and a lot more cleanly, And it's not as good as line caught. Well, right about now, you're getting the best salmon you can possibly get. Copper River salmon out of Alaska. That's really expensive. I mean, but you don't want to make a salmon patty out of Copper River salmon. But if you can buy inexpensive farm-grown salmon now, we've got a really nice recipe on the website for salmon burgers or salmon sausage. And that's always fun. So there's some ideas for your weekend coming up, and for as long as the supply chain has got us over a barrel on, steaks. Boy, they're expensive. And you can go for the lesser cuts. They're not cheap. We have a bunch of friends coming over just after 4th of July.
Sorry,
and I'm going to do...
I'm having trouble
Siri,
hearing you.
shut up. We're having a bunch of friends coming over after the 4th of July, and I'm doing flank steaks. And they're not cheap, but they're cheaper than your ribeyes and your strip steaks. And if you want to have some fun, go to AmazingRibs.com or on our YouTube channel and look up how I cook flank steak. I cook it over grapevines. I have some grapevines on my property, and you can find wild grapevines just with a walk in the woods. And but you have grapevines, you have to prune them. And if you're near vineyards, they're always out there in the winter pruning them. And there's this big pile of twigs, and they're about the thickness of pencils. And I bring them back, and I let them age for a few months until they dry out. And then I take my Weber kettle and cram as many as I can into my Weber kettle. Oh, first I put a little newspaper in the bottom. Then I cram the top as many as I can and put the grate in there, push it down as tight as I can. And then I light it from underneath so the newspaper catches on fire. And these twigs catch on fire, and they make like this 8-foot flame. Now, you don't want to cook over that. It's way too hot, and there's too many impurities in that flame. It tastes funky. But you wait till that flame dies down below the grate, and it happens in like 10 minutes. You light it, you got this 8-foot flame, and then within 10 minutes, you've got this bed of glowing coals, and it's still 800-900 degrees. And you throw your flank steak or skirt steak, a really thin cut, not too thick. You could do a ribeye, but you don't want a 2-inch thick ribeye this way. It doesn't stay hot enough long enough, because within another 10 minutes, the fire's dead. But I do my flank steaks, and the flavor from these grapevines is marvelous, and I get this incredible char, and it's medium rare in the center. And I've got a video of this process on AmazingRibs.com. Just look up flank steak. It's pretty spectacular to see, very showy, which is why I'm doing it for company. Of course, I want to show off. It's just a lot of fun, and it's just awesome, and they taste great. So those are a couple of ideas there. That's my soliloquy, my opening remarks here. Let's see if there's anything I need to talk about. Just a couple of things. We still have 30-day free trials for people in our Pitmaster Club. And if you don't know about it, if you haven't tried it, take the free 30-day trial. We don't ask for your credit card. I think you really like it. When you become a member, you get 6 free ebooks that I've written. And they're really good. They're chock full of information one on ribs, one on brisket, one on chicken, one on Sous vide Q. And you get all 6 for free. They sell for $3.99 on Amazon, and they sell briskly. They're all free to our members. You get some magazine subscriptions, a lot of other freebies. Check it out. Take the 30-day free trial. I think you'll like it. And sign up for our email newsletter, because it tells you when we're doing events like this and other things. I'm going to be in Milwaukee, by the way, June 25th. Anybody here from Milwaukee or nearby? I'm going to be at the Public Market, which is downtown. It's an incredible indoor farmers market, and I'm going to be doing a presentation there. And there's an announcement in our newsletters and in the Pitmaster Club about that. and it's on their website, the public market. What else do I need to tell you about? Oh, we just published a really good article by our webmaster who's written his first article for us, Jim Meathead. He's an avid camper, and there's a really cool way to refill these 1 pound propane tanks. And if you've done any camping, you know what I'm talking about. Coleman makes most of them. They look like a gallon, not like a milk bottle, but they hold 1 pound. They're little dark green propane bottles, and you can use them for searing. A lot of people use them for soldering, but they're great for camp stoves and other things. And Fire Magic makes this kit with a tank that is designed to be refilled. These Coleman tanks are not designed to be refilled. You can refill them, but it's risky. They can explode, they can leak, and you don't want to take that chance. But they cost $6 to $10. If you refill them, the cost is about $1 or $2. And you can refill them from a 20-gallon propane tank like you have on your gas grill. You just got to buy this kit, and it comes with the refillable tank. Now, it only comes with one, and I haven't been able to, short supply. I haven't been able to buy more than one, but I'm sure they'll come back on the market eventually. So you could buy half a dozen of these tanks and just refill them, and it has a 12-year refill lifespan. So that's a really cool thing, and Jim wrote about it. It's on our website now. And I also wrote about it in our Pitmaster Club. Okay. So, I see, I'm looking at who's here. I see Dan Mancuso. Dan, I don't think you've missed one of these in a long time. Nice to see you back here again. We have Kuski, who's actually Linda from San Diego. Let's see. Got a couple of jerks from Twitch, whom I will no longer address or talk about. Mike Ross from Kentucky says he loves the book. Great, thank you. The book is still going strong. It's sold 250,000 copies. It's the #1 best-selling barbecue book on Amazon right now. Sky Joe says the pork rub posted on the website. That's our Memphis dust. Really good recipe, really tasty, great on pulled pork. Yes. Nils is saying hello from Germany. Welcome, Nils. Henry Hayes, as a non-drinker, what do you do? Wort beer, wort marinade on what meat? I don't know what WRT means. Well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about marinades. That's a good topic. Marinades are really misunderstood. Okay, meat is about 75% water. And in general, it's fully saturated. You buy a steak or a chicken, there's no room in there for anything more. It's fully saturated. It's like a balloon that's filled. You can't put anything more in there. So you can soak it in a marinade, and the marinade will get into the tiny pores and cracks and crevices that are microscopic on the surface, but they can't actually penetrate deep into the meat. So for a chicken breast, for example, you can marinate it overnight. And if you go to AmazingRibs.com and you use the search box and you type marinades, you'll see I show a chicken breast that's marinated overnight, and I put green dye in it. And it's only on the surface. The center of that chicken breast has no marinade in it. It can't get in. The molecules, first of all, are too large. The meat is fully saturated. Now, what it can do is it can flavor the surface, and that's nice. So you can flavor the surface, but you can also flavor the surface with a dry rub, with spices and herbs. And you don't have to worry about all the liquids and stuff. And all marinade recipes seem to have oil in them. Well, if meat is 75% water, now you know oil and water don't mix. There is no way on this earth or any other planet in our solar system that oil is going to penetrate the meat. It just can't do it. And those oil molecules are huge. The only thing that can get into meat, whether you sprinkle it on the surface or you marinate it or what you do, rub it in, is salt. Salt is the magic rock. And if you've been here before, Dan, you can go to sleep now. You've heard this speech before. Salt's the magic rock. It's 2 little atoms, sodium and chloride. So it's not a big molecule. Sugar is 23 atoms. These 2 little atoms, and when they get wet, they get electrically charged. It's called ionization, and they can penetrate deep. And they do wonders when they get down in there. They denature the protein, which means they change its structure, and then it helps it hold on to moisture better. And it amplifies the flavor without altering it. Garlic and pepper will amplify flavor, but they also alter the flavor. So salt is magic. You want to use salt, and you want to brine or dry brine. That is to say, sprinkle salt on your meat. But when it comes to marinating, it doesn't get in there. And here's related to your question, alcohol, wine, or beer really mangles the proteins on the surface. It can make the surface mushy, and you don't want to do that. The other thing is when the surface of the meat is wet, if you throw it on a hot grill and you want to brown it, and you do want to brown most foods, meats, vegetables, because when you brown things, you change the structure of the proteins. It's called the Maillard reaction. It's a chemical reaction, and it changes the proteins and creates all these marvelous flavors. And you know that. The dark parts of a roast, the brown parts, that's why you toast bread. That's why you roast coffee beans and chocolate beans. It's the Maillard reaction. When the surface of the meat is wet and you put it over heat, what happens? The moisture turns to steam. So it can't brown the surface until all that moisture is evaporated. When it evaporates, it does leave behind the flavor molecules. So whatever marinade you're mixing up, you'll get the flavor molecules, but by then you're blowing a lot of the chance you have to brown the surface. So I'm not a big advocate of marinating meats. The couple of exceptions, let me rephrase that. A lot of vegetables and fish, they will absorb marinades better than most other meats. Not much, not far, but they will absorb them a little better. And thin meats like skirt steak. You're going to make a Mexican taco with skirt steak. This is a very thin cut of meat. Now, if the marinade can only penetrate a 1/16 of an inch, which is about as far as it'll go on any piece of meat, a 1/16 of an inch on a piece of meat that's only a 1/2 inch, 1/16 inch on either side, that's an 1/8 inch. That's an 1/8 inch out of a 1/2 inch piece of meat. 1/2 inch is 4/8. Now you've got 1/8 that has been penetrated, 3/8 that has not. So a significant portion, 25% of a skirt steak, has in fact been penetrated by the marinade. So yeah, in a case of a thin steak or a thin piece of meat, the marinades will penetrate 25% of the meat. But when it comes to a chicken breast or a beef steak or something like that, no dice. And you want to, you can leave the oil out because it ain't going in. And I would recommend you leave the alcohol out. And a lot of people think they like to marinate in beer and stuff. And hey, beer is bitter. I don't know if I want bitterness on my meats. So there are some marinades that work. And then there's what I call brinerades, and they're marinades that have a bit of salt in it. And that's cool because the salt will penetrate. The rest of the stuff will stay on the surface. So now I do a lot more about this in my book, which you can see hovering over my shoulder, and on AmazingRibs.com. Okay. Oh, Jason Pettis has got a really nice idea. He likes to mix chopped barbecue leftovers, like leftover ribs. You have leftover ribs? You need to work on your technique, man. No, I'm kidding. Or brisket. Yeah, there's almost always leftover brisket. And chop it up and add it to his meatloaf. That's a really interesting concept. Now, it's pre-cooked, but you're not going to use a whole lot. About 2 parts to 1 part, he says, 2 parts ground meat to 1 part chopped cooked meat. That's probably a good ratio. I like that idea. And now you're going to get smoked pork or beef into the blend. I like that idea. Sky just saying he's having trouble getting skirt steak at Hy-Vee. Everything is just weird out there now. I don't know Hy-Vee, but here's something interesting. Often, you need to get to know the butcher. I think knowing your butcher is more important than knowing your stockbroker. I hope there's no stockbrokers in the audience going to get mad at me. But, often if you go back to the butcher counter and hit that bell, the butcher comes out, and you get to know the butcher, and you say, hey, I don't see any skirt steak. He'll look around and say, well, son of a gun, we're out of it. I got a whole box of it in the back. He or she will go get it for you. Other times they'll say, we got a shipment coming in on Thursday. Or, we don't have much call for it, so we don't stock it. But if you want some, I can order it and get it in for you. And that, that's, brisket in particular. People who like to cook brisket. Grocery stores just don't stock brisket. Certainly not a whole packer brisket, which is 12 to 18 pounds. They don't stock it. There's just no need for it. There's no desire. But if you want to cook a whole brisket for, say, Memorial Day, well, it's a little late, you go to your butcher a week in advance and say, I could really use a USDA prime. You want to try to get prime. It's a little more expensive. Beef brisket. And he or she will often say, sure, I can order it. I'll have it here for you Friday. And bada bing, bada boom, away you go. So get to know your butcher. And a good thing to do is, and I've done this and it works, is I've cooked up a bunch of ribs, say, for a party or something. And I'll bring a slab of ribs down there right around lunchtime. My local grocery, Tischler's, they have a picnic table out alongside this, where the staff goes out and they sit and eat their lunch outdoors and they chat and visit with each other. And I'll show up with a slab of ribs and toss it on the table and for the butchers and say, here, this is what I did with your meat. And they like it and they remember me. And I've had occasion when I walk into the grocery store and they see me at the meat counter, I've had them come out and say, hey, we just got in some USDA choice ribeye steaks, but I got to tell you, they're so heavily marbled, they could be USDA prime. I'll get you some. That's great, man. So get to know your butcher and maybe throw a slab of ribs at them and suck up to them. It'll pay off. Yeah, Jim Cheshire is talking about pellets, the moisture content of pellets. It's not so much the moisture content in the pellets. They burn very efficiently. Your best burn is from wood that has a little moisture content in it, logs, and most pellets are bone dry, and they burn very efficiently. So people with pellet smokers love them because they're really easy to operate. But I occasionally hear complaints, particularly from the ones in Texas, where they're used to their barbecue having big, powerful, smoky flavor. Pellet smokers don't make big, powerful, smoky flavors. They make elegant, delicate, smoky. It's a difference between a brass band and a string quartet. Pellet smokers are a string quartet, and that's fine with me. I have a Mac 2-star, and I love it. And, for things like turkey or chicken where I don't want a lot of smoke, they're perfect. For a brisket, I'll cook brisket over charcoal with wood chunks or over logs because I want lots of wood, and it takes a while to get it going. Jason Pettis is talking about leftover comp day. Okay, so sure, I was joking him about leftover ribs. Well, if you're cooking in competition, you always cook 2 or 3 slabs of ribs, and you only turn in 6 bones. So you've always got leftover. So that's a really good technique for making meatloaf or meatballs. Yeah, smart. Jason, you must be a rich man if you compete. I'm just kidding. But a competition barbecue has become a rich man's sport. It's just really expensive to compete. I know a lot of you think, hey, I'm good enough, I can compete. But you got to cook like 2 to 3 slabs of ribs to get 6 perfect bones to turn in, and at least 2 briskets. And nowadays, the competition cooks are all cooking Wagyu brisket. I don't know. Jason, you're here. You cook. Do you know what a Wagyu brisket costs, a packer nowadays? $200? $300? I don't know. I mean, and often they cook 2 of them. How much does a Wagyu brisket nowadays? Somebody go to Snake River Farms and look up Wagyu brisket and tell us what they cost. They're expensive. I don't know because I haven't bought one. Now, here's something. I mentioned that I'm going to be doing this flank steak for company coming up. I cook Wagyu flank steak. I don't cook Wagyu steaks. I don't cook Wagyu brisket. But I cook Wagyu flank steak. Now, flank steak, it comes from down in the abdomen, and it's a hard-working muscle, and it's very lean. But it's got a lot of flavor because it's a really hard-working muscle. And I just love slicing it thin. And I do something called a board sauce, and I'll talk about that. But you can get Wagyu flank steak, and it takes flank steak to a new level, and it's not all that expensive. It's not cheap, but I'll tell you, it is the only flank steak I buy now. Dan is saying that Wagyu is around $35 a pound, so your average brisket runs 8 to 18 pounds for what they call a packer. That's a whole brisket with 2 muscles in it. And most of them are in the 10 to 12 pound range. So 10 pounds at $35 a pound. Look at what you're talking about. And if you're cooking 2 of them, now you're talking $700 just for the brisket. Then come the ribs. Then comes the chicken. And then, if they have a dessert category or something. So, plus, you got to drive from wherever you live to the competition site, cost of gasoline. Got to stay in a hotel or pitch a campsite. It's just, it's really an expensive hobby. If you love to cook, just banish the thought of competing. Now, if you're really good, some of the prize money is pretty good. You can walk away with a few $1,000. But I don't know many competition cooks who come away at the end of the season profitable. Okay? Yeah, Keith David says you're talking about the pellets. I keep trying and cooking at 225, which is a temperature I recommend, and you don't get much smoke flavor that you used to do with your smoke vault. And that is the nature of cooking with pellets. Now, there is a workaround. Pellets sit in a little cup at the bottom, and there's a heating element that goes in there that lights them. You can put a big chunk of wood into that cup or on top of that cup, like a small log, and it will burn with a flame, and it has more moisture and more compounds and more flavor. And you can amp up the flavor of a pellet smoker by putting chunks or logs. If you put it in the cup, it might interfere with the functioning of the pellet smoker. So you might lay it on top, put a mesh on top, and then lay them on top. See how you do with that. Add some extra wood, real wood, instead of pellets. See if that doesn't amp it up. But yes, if you really like a big, strong wood flavor, you're not going to get it easily from pellets. Ryan Leal's asking, is doing pork butt sous vide Q worth doing? How would I rate its taste up against traditional smoked pork butt? Yeah, sous vide, I'm just going to give you the thumbnail because I know that there's some folks out here who don't know what it is. Sous vide is this technique. It's been around for a while, but for many people, they consider it still fairly new. You take the meat and you put it in a Ziploc bag and you slide it into a pot of water, and the water presses all the air out of the bag, and then you seal it up so there's no water in there. or you can use a vacuum sealer. But basically, you're putting the meat in a plastic bag and pulling all the air out. So the bag, it conforms to the meat. Then you're putting this bagged meat into the pot of water, and there's a heating element you put in there, and you set it for the temperature that you want. For example, a medium rare steak is 130 to 135 degrees. And we know at that temperature it's really tender, really juicy. So you can put a steak in at 131 and it'll never overcook. You can't overcook in sous vide, because if the water is 131, the meat can't go to 132. There's not enough heat. It will go to 131 and stay there. And it takes 3-4 hours to cook meat at that temperature. And you can leave it in there for hours. In fact, you can take it out, put it in the fridge, come back the next day and reheat it. And it's really good. The thing that sous vide does is it makes meat really tender. But when you take it out of the bag, it doesn't have any color. It doesn't have the Maillard reaction, the seared flavor. And so what you can do is then you can put it over a hot grill, or what I'll do is I'll put it over a charcoal chimney. I get a charcoal chimney, and I've got video of this on the site. And you get that charcoal chimney, it'll go over 1,000 degrees. You put a steak on top of a charcoal chimney, and it sears in about 2 minutes. So you can get a fantastic sear. So you sous vide it, take it out, and put it on the charcoal chimney. And in fact, there's going to be a new restaurant opening here in Chicago. Barry Sorkin, who owns one of my favorite barbecue restaurants in the country, Smoke, Smoque. He's opening a steakhouse, and he's going to do his steaks this way. There are pros and cons for things like ribs, brisket, and pork butt. There's a lot of water loss in the sous vide bag, but it still comes out tasting really moist. You're not going to get as much smoke when you come out of a sous vide. I think the answer to this question is you need to experiment. You need to do one each way. You need to do a little math. You know how to cook sous vide. Figure out how long it's going to take to do your pork butt, probably 24 hours, something like that. It depends. If you take the bone out and you lay it flat, it'll cook a little faster. And there's a lot of fat in there. And it's not going to render at 150 degrees or something like that. And then you throw one in the smoker and pull them both out at the same time, or take it out of the sous vide bag, then throw it in the smoker. And by the way, it'll get a smoke ring in. Never mind. Check that. It won't get a smoke ring. Sous vide meat it's been cooked, and the myoglobin, which causes the smoke ring, has been altered, and so you can't get a smoke ring if you've done sous vide. But try it and see which you like better. I love my sous vide machine. I'm just not using it as much as I used to. I was head over heels about it when it first came out, and I was doing everything sous vide, carrots and fish. I'm not using it much. I'll tell you what I've been using it for lately. I've been pasteurizing eggs, because I love béarnaise and hollandaise sauce, which uses raw egg yolk, or raw. You can do it with actually whole eggs. There is a reasonably high risk of salmonella in raw eggs. If you cook it to 155 or so, there's a chance you're going to overcook the yolks, and you need to get it up to that temp to make it safe. But you can take a raw egg and sous vide it at 140 and not cook the egg, but still pasteurize it. And it's pretty cool. And then you can make eggnog, you can make béarnaise, hollandaise, and feel comfortable that nobody's going to get sick. So pasteurizing eggs is a fun way to use the sous vide machine. Rick Heath is chiming in. He sous vides pork butts at 165 for 24 hours and then puts it on the smoker for a few hours. He saves the juice from the sous vide bag and adds it back to the pulled pork. Oh, that's clever. Some people actually try to make a sauce from it. You got to be careful, because if you've salted the meat, that juice can be very salty. But if you're adding it back, that's pretty good. That might work really well. You might try that. Jeff Hansen picked up picanha. Okay. Picanha is a really interesting cut of meat. It should, if it's butchered properly, a thick layer of fat. And in general, I tell people to remove the excess fat. But that fat on the picanha is the best fat on the animal. It's really tasty. And so that's a dish that it does benefit from sous vide. I've taken picanha and sous vided it, so take it up to 130 or so, makes it really tender and juicy, then pull it out and sear the snot out of it, either on a charcoal chimney or a hibachi, a cheap hibachi. My gas grill has an infrared burner, which is really hot. And get that fat really well seared and golden and have it render down. And it sounds gross eating, a 1/4 inch thick layer of fat, but wait till you taste that stuff. Yeah, Jim Cheshire says he finds that sous vide doesn't produce the texture I like in a steak. It does alter the texture. I've done side by side, sous vide and reverse sear. The reverse sear, I think, has a better flavor and texture, but the sous vide is more tender and juicy. So it's a trade-off. Which do you want, tender and juicy, or a nice firm but not hard texture and extra flavor from the grill and the smoking? It's a trade-off. And I think what you need to do is you just need to have some fun and experiment and figure out which one you like best. All right, now, come on, guys. It's 8:20. We haven't been at this for an hour. And usually I wrap up after an hour. Sometimes I go an hour and a half. We got a little time here. Any more questions? Let's see. I'm rolling back. Oh, Andrew Campbell loves the book. Thank you very much. And the website has delighted my family. You just made my day. I was interviewed today yesterday by New Yorker magazine. I believe there's going to be an article on propane smokers in the New Yorker tomorrow online, featuring yours truly. And I like my propane smoker. She was talking about, why do I do this? And I'll tell you, I just get a thrill out of people telling me that cooking my recipes enhances their life. I mean, I get people tell me that when they come home from work, the kids say, "Mom, could Dad cook tonight?" What a thrill for me to hear that. There's a page on our website called Testimonials, and oh gosh, there's stories in there about people who cooked for their dying father and how much he loved the food that they did and how much it made their relationship better. I've heard young people say, "I got laid last night because of your recipe." I mean, that really is. I'm glad I found this occupation. I've had several careers. I'm going to be 73 next week. And I've really found my sweet spot, and I'm really happy with my career now. Trying to make a minced beef jerky. I have a jerk gun. Suggestions for best temp versus time over. I got to tell you, Henry, I'm sorry to say, I haven't done much beef jerky. Now, when I do jerky, I do it, well, people say I'm doing it wrong, but I do it safe. I don't do cold smoking at all. I don't recommend it for fish, for salmon, or anything else. It's just too high risk. The way to kill bacteria is with heat. You can kill most bacteria in the 130 to 135 range, but it takes a long time. You can kill all bacteria in under 10 seconds at 155 to 160 or so. I do jerky. There's a recipe on my website, and it's a really nice jerky, but it's different than the jerkies you buy. But I really like it. It's with an Asian flavored marinade. We cook it essentially at low temp, but I'm making sure it's properly cooked. I've never used a jerk gun. I've heard of them and I've seen it, but I can't remember what they look like and how they work. So I'm afraid I am not much help to you there. You've stumped the star, pal. Yeah, Jim Cheshire is telling, I forget who it was that was struggling with smoke flavor in his pellet smoker, to cook at a lower temp. And that's true. If you cook at a lower temperature on a pellet smoker, the wood smolders and you get more smoke flavor. So, yeah, you can dial it down. Cat Steele is suggesting use a tube with chips. You know, that's an interesting idea. There are tubes that you can buy that are perforated, or there's actually a bag. We recommend it's like a stainless steel mesh bag, and I've got a recommendation for one on the website. I can't remember the brand, but you put wood chips or chunks. Don't soak them. Don't soak them. Just put them in there and let them burn. You want them to catch fire and burn. You don't want them to smolder. Burning wood makes a better flavor than smoldering wood. There's an interesting question from Ryan Leal. Does grilling, say a tri-tip Santa Maria style, produce a different flavor than grilling it with two-zone reverse sear like you usually recommend? Yeah, this is a good question. Tri-tip is a really interesting cut of meat. It's sort of boomerang shaped. It's got a slight bend to it, and it's thick in the center, almost as thick as a tenderloin, but it's tapered at the end. So if you cook it on a Santa Maria grill, which is the traditional way, because this is a cut that's very popular in Southern California around Santa Maria. A Santa Maria grill is a grill where it has a crank and you can raise and lower it, and it's usually cooking over logs that have burned down to embers, and it's usually post oak that they use down there, and or red oak. And what you get is the tips tend to be overcooked, but that's usually somebody in the family who wants their meat medium or well done, and so they get the tips. The centerpiece you can get medium rare and just perfect. Now, if you go to a two-zone system and reverse sear, now you've got a better chance of making the whole thing medium rare. Reverse sear, for those who don't know the term, is a technique for starting meat at a low temperature, not searing it yet. You start it at a low temperature so it gently warms, and that way it's even temperature throughout. And then at the end of the cook, you hit it with really high temperature, not at the beginning, because when you start at the beginning, the residual temperature goes all the way through, and you end up with overcooked meat, or with meat with what I call the rainbow effect, where it's dark on the outside, and then it's tan just below, and then it's pink, and then finally medium rare in the center. If you start at a low temp, it'll become the perfect medium rare temp all the way through. Then you sear it really hot at the end with the lid open, so all the energy is just hitting one side, flip it, and that energy bleeds off. And so you get a really good dark exterior and perfectly medium rare throughout. You don't get all that wood flavor, all that smoky flavor that you would get on a Santa Maria, but you get it more evenly cooked. So again, you've got a trade-off. You want it, cooked to the perfect temperature and medium rare with a good crust, or do you want it with a good crust and a little more smoky flavor, but run the risk of having the narrow, thinner parts a little overcooked? And, what I would do is I would survey the audience, Memorial Day. Who likes their meat medium well? Okay, I got 3 people. Okay, I'm doing it Santa Maria style. I'm looking back through the questions to see if I missed something. I'm pretty far down the list here. If I missed your question, I'm able to see everybody from Facebook and YouTube and Twitch, and so I can see where you're coming from. I can see all your comments. So if I've jumped over your comment, hit me again. I apologize if I've missed you. Jeffrey Bullock says he actually feels like he's understanding what I'm doing instead of hoping for the best. Yeah, that's my whole mission here. This is 2022, boys and girls. We're in a technological society. A lot of people just don't want me telling you, do step 1, do step 2, and just shut up. Do step 3. They want to know, why do I do step 1? What happens if I skip step 2? What happens if I substitute brown sugar for white sugar? So they want to know why. And if you haven't seen the book, the first half of the book is a textbook. It's all about what is fire, what is smoke, what is energy, what is heat, what is meat, what is vegetables. And I'm working on a new book in which I go a little deeper into the science and also into the art, culinary art. And it won't be out till spring 24. But I'm putting all my energy into it now. So that's what we like to do. Yeah, Phil, smoke that tri-tip first to about 130-ish. Mm-hmm. And then nuke it. When you say nuke it, I'm presuming you don't mean 110-ish. Okay, that's even better. Then hit it with the high temp. That'll knock it up to 125, 130. I might take it to 115. You got to experiment. Your unit is different. But when you're hitting it with the high heat, leave the lid open. That's key. With the lid down, it's baking. With the lid open, you're getting it, and you want it right over infrared energy. You want it over glowing coals or flames. That's infrared energy, and that is really intense heat. And that's how you get that Maillard reaction and the browning. But if you leave the lid open and then you flip, you want to flip often. I know a lot of the books say just leave it there and don't flip it, but if that happens, the heat starts to penetrate and you get that rainbow effect. But if you flip it, then the heat that builds up in the surface, some of it will penetrate, but some of it will bleed off into the atmosphere. So you have a better chance of getting an even temperature throughout. And I know a bunch of you know the concepts behind reverse sear. I didn't invent it, but I've done a lot to popularize it. And it's really a great technique for cooking most things, especially things like poultry, chicken. I mean, how many times have you gone to a 4th of July party and they're grilling chicken and they put the chicken out on the platter and it's got scorch marks on the outside and the sauce is crispy and burnt and it's raw in the middle? If you reverse sear, if you cook it over indirect heat, not over flames, not over charcoal, in just convection airflow, low and slow, so that it's cooked evenly throughout to about 150, 155. Then you move it over high heat, lid up, and then you can crisp the skin, brown the other side, pull it off. It's absolutely spot on perfect, and it's safe. It's cooked throughout. It's really an important technique for poultry. Don't worry about your spelling, Phil. I got you. What do I consider the necessary, sustainable maximum temperature needed for good general-purpose gas grill to be able to sustain? Aha. Okay, this is a really interesting question. I don't care about temperature. What I care about is the nature of the energy. Now, I've had this. Okay, Dan, it's time for you to take another nap. I noticed he was Zing earlier. Dan sat through so many of these. He's heard the 3 different kinds of energy speech before, but let me touch on it again quickly. In a grill, you have 3 different kinds of energy, and it's important to think of it as energy rather than heat. You have convection airflow. Now, I'm going to tell you on almost all cases to divide your grill into 2 halves. A hot side with flame or glowing coals, and a not hot side with no coals, no flame. And when you close the lid, the hot air comes from the hot side and it circulates throughout. And on the side without the coals, the meat can gently warm from convection airflow. But air is a poor conductor of energy. So it takes time to warm up the meat when it's just warming with warm air. But that's good because it warms slowly and evenly. And the reason it warms slowly is it's 75% water, and water takes time to warm up. Then, when you move it over infrared energy, when you put it over the flame or the coals, then you've got a lot of condensed, concentrated energy. And so it's not so much temperature. Think of going outside on a sunny day. You step into the sun, and everybody knows there's ultraviolet radiation, but there's only a little ultraviolet, and that's what gives you sunburn. What you're feeling on the back of your neck is infrared. The sun is putting out mucho infrared, and that's energy that warms things and heats things, and that's what makes the back of your neck hot, which makes you sweat. Now step into the shade. You're shaded from the infrared. The shade is cooking in the indirect side where it's convection airflow. The sunny portion is infrared energy. So what I want from a gas grill is intense infrared energy, and I want that flame as close to the meat as I can get it. And this is where most gas grills fall down. The flame is pretty far down, and they have these little heat protectors. On a Weber, it's like a little A-shaped tent that sits over the burner. And what it does, it protects the burner from the fats and the grease dripping into the holes, blocking up the holes, corroding the burners, wearing out your gas grill. But it's also preventing the energy from getting to the meat. My brother-in-law, Peter Lane, lives in Pompano Beach. Pompano Beach Body Shop. He's a body. If you're down that way and you need your body work, go see my brother-in-law Peter. He has an old beater of a gas grill where he cooks over open burners with those little, you remember them, the ceramic faux briquettes, and there's one layer, and they get glowing hot. And he makes the most incredible swordfish because he's cooking over infrared on his gas grill. Now, I have a gas grill that has an infrared burner, and it's ceramic, and it looks like a honeycomb, little tiny honeycomb. It's called a Heston. Go to the website and look up my review of the Heston, and I have pictures of that infrared burner. And that baby gets up to 1,000 degrees, and it's loaded with infrared. So if you're shooting for a gas grill, you want something that has a sear zone. And I got to tell you, if you want to make a great steak, you can usually get a better sear on a $35 hibachi than you can on a $3,500 gas grill. So you want to make sure you can get a lot of infrared. Now, there's a measurement called flux, F-L-U-X. They all talk about BTUs, but BTUs is essentially how much gas it burns. It's like miles per gallon. That doesn't matter. What matters is how many BTUs per square inch. So you get up to how close it is. And that's called the flux. And Max Good, who does all our grill reviews, calculates the flux on all the gas grills. So you want something with a high flux number. And go there and poke around and look at them. And if you need help, just ask Max. Post a question and say, Max, I want a gas grill, but I want something that can get a great sear on a steak. What do you recommend? There's one that I really am fond of, the Napoleon 500. It's not terribly expensive. It's about the same price, I think, as a Weber Genesis. And I love Weber grills. But this Napoleon 500 has an infrared burner on the left side shelf. So you can use it to warm your sauces, but you can also sear on it. And it's really, really hot, nasty hot. So look at the Napoleon 500 and see if that will fit your budget. For a gas grill. And I'll tell you, if you've got a really good infrared burner like my Heston or that Napoleon 500, You can't tell the difference between it and charcoal. The reason so many people love charcoal, and they think it's the flavor, but it's not, it's the infrared. Because charcoal pumps out the infrared. You can't tell the difference between my gas grill infrared burner steak and my Weber charcoal grill or whatever. It's the infrared that makes the flavors more than it is the energy source. It's the type of energy, not the energy source. Follow me? Phil Levy's talking about a product called Grill Grates. And that's not a generic term. It's Grill Grates' trademark. It's a brand of grate that fits on the grill. And it really is good at concentrating heat and creating some infrared. And it will amp up if you've got an old beater of a gas grill and it's not really doing a good job. Consider putting Grill Grates. Now that's the brand name, Grill Grates trademark. And we have a review of it. I've done a review on our site. Consider putting those. It'll improve your gas grill. Sorry to put the other dude. Dan has probably heard this presentation, but Dan, you'll forgive me. He comes regularly, and I get a lot of questions that require the same answer. Dan asked what my favorite mix of meat for burgers is. For burgers, I'm kind of a traditionalist, and it's pure beef, but I go for 70-30 instead of 80-20, and that when I say 70-30. I mean 70% lean, 30% fat, and that's a lot of fat. Most burger meat is 70-20 or 85-15 or most burger meat is 80-20 or 15% fat or 10% fat for very lean. And fat produces a lot of flavor. And I've been playing with it lately, and I got to tell you something. And those of you who've read my site and my book know that I love busting myths. Everybody tells you when you put a burger on the grill, don't squish it with the spatula, because that squeezes out all the juices. And they're right about that. But if you know a lot about grilling, you know that when juices hit hot coals, they vaporize, they burn, and they go back up and they flavor the meat. So if you go for meat that's higher in fat content, put it on the grill and press it slightly so that the fat drips out, hits the fire, and comes back up. If you're dealing with a 70-30 blend, you can spare a little of that fat, and you get that vaporized fat coming back up into the meat. And that I like, and I've been discovering that the fatter my blend is, I can squeeze a little of that fat. Or the other technique that I've played with is when I trim my brisket, I trim a lot of fat off the brisket, and I'll freeze some of those chunks of fat. And when I'm cooking a burger, I'll throw some of that fat on the burner or the charcoal and let it burn and vaporize. Probably is carcinogenic, I don't know. But, you probably got to eat a lot of burgers to worry about getting cancer. But it makes some very nice flavor. Burning fat gets up into the meat and makes good flavor. And, there are a bunch of old-style barbecue joints. If you've ever been to Dreamland in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, this guy's been doing ribs for centuries, and he does them directly over embers from logs, directly over the logs. They cook pretty darn fast, but the fat drips onto the embers and comes back up onto the meat. And there's almost a grilled steak flavor to his ribs. They taste different. They taste marvelous, though. They're a little tougher and chewier because they're cooking at a higher temperature. And for years, when I was just getting into barbecue, all the barbecue snobs were poo-pooing Dreamland. Because he cooks directly over the coals, and you know that you have to cook indirect to get great ribs. You go down there and you tell the University of Alabama football team sitting around you that ain't real barbecue, and see if you come out alive. It's really tasty. And a lot of Texas joints also cook over glowing coals. So it's something to play with. But in answer to your question, I like, Dan, a 70-30 blend. And here's an interesting tip. Professor Blonder, who's worked with me, a food scientist and a physicist, a real polymath, He did an interesting experiment and proved, and we have this on the website, that if you add salt to ground meat, it compacts the meat and makes it tougher. So when you're building your burger, you can add all the herbs and spices. You add the garlic and the onion and whatever you want. Don't mix the salt in. Hold the salt until just before you cook, and then sprinkle the salt on the outside. You do want salt. Salt amplifies flavor, makes it good, but don't add the salt until the last minute, and you'll get a juicier, more tender burger. And another tip is don't overhandle your burgers. You want, if you squish them around, or you get one of these burger presses, where you're going to get you perfectly uniform burgers and you squish the meat, you want to handle it loosely so that there's pockets inside for the juices to stay. If you squish it flat, then the juices are going to come out and you won't have juice staying in the burger. Yeah, Greg Whitted is Whited has showed up and asked, what about preheating a cast iron skillet over a screaming hot grill to sear a steak? Amen. And in fact, if you have got a pellet smoker, you've probably discovered you really can't get a really good sear on a steak, because a pellet smoker is built like your indoor oven. The flame is underneath a metal plate. And so now you're pretty much cooking indirect all the time, and you're not getting any infrared. There's a few of them that have workarounds where you can get a little infrared. And the way to make a great steak on a pellet smoker is just as you said, Greg. Put your cast iron griddle or a cast iron frying pan on that smoker. Let it come to temp. And that is conduction. And I forgot to mention that when I was talking about the 3 types of energy. There's convection, infrared, and conduction. Conduction is what happens when you put meat on the grill grates. You get grill marks because the hot metal brands the meat. Well, instead of just using stripes of hot metal, use a cast iron pan or a griddle, put the steak in there. And now you've got it all round, all over, even colored brown, and that's what you want. And that's a great technique for doing steak. So you put your steak into the pellet smoker at a low temp, say 225, get smoke onto your steak, bring it up to about 120 or so. Your target is 130 to 135. Bring it up to 120. Get some smoke on it. It still hasn't got a good sear. You're not going to get a good sear on a pellet smoker. Now you put your cast iron pan in there, get that baby good and hot, and just throw your steak in there. You don't need any oil. If you want to put a thin layer of oil in there, you want to put a little thin layer of beef fat in there, put a thin layer of bacon fat. You can do that and just sear the snot out of it. A trick that I've done that works is when I get aged beef, if I trim it, I save the trim from the aged beef, and it has the aged beef flavor. And I've been known to paint that onto a steak before I sear it or into the cast iron pan, and it actually transmits some of the aged beef flavor to the meat. So there, try that, Greg. Okay. Yeah, Dan is asking, what about a mix of chuck, brisket, or something else in the mix? Yeah, there's a whole cult around mixing chuck and brisket, and I haven't noticed a big difference. I've tried it. I haven't really done good side-to-side experiments. I haven't found that there's a huge difference in the flavor between ground chuck and ground brisket. I think the real difference comes in the fat-to-meat ratio and in your cooking method. But yeah, there are people that swear on chuck brisket blend, and these are people who know how to cook, so probably worth experimenting. And it might just be fun to do 3 burgers, 1 pure chuck, 1 pure brisket, 1 a blend, and do them all side by side and see which one you like best. And let me know, Dan. I'll see you here next month. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. He's talking about our science. Yeah, I'm a geek. This is the era of food geekery. I mean, you see it in Alton Brown. You see it in Christopher Kimball over at Milk Street. It's a movement in the culinary world now. And I'm part of that movement. And I think that's because we want to know why. All right, I think we've answered all the questions there are. We're going on an hour and 48 minutes. No, a little less than that. It's an hour and 15, around 20 minutes or so. And I don't know if I mentioned, I'm getting to be an old man. I didn't get a good night's sleep. You know what I discovered? Chocolate keeps me awake. There's a really good little candy store where they make all their own chocolates right across the street from the post office. And, of course, people, occasionally I send books to the media people and others, and I got a stack of books, and I have to wrap them up and take them to the post office. And I come out and go to my car, and there's the candy store. So I stopped in there, and yesterday I got some dark chocolate salted caramels. They were fantastic. And my wife and I munched on them while watching a movie last night, and it kept me up all night. So I'm kind of faded right now. So normally I would go for another 15 or 20 minutes, but I promise an hour, and I've over-delivered and I've under-delivered from what I usually do. But I think I've hit all your questions. So I thank you for your attention. I thank you for your presence. And you guys in Twitch, I'm glad. I think I got rid of you, and that's the way it should be. And I want to invite you, if you have not tried it yet, go to AmazingRibs.com, sign up for our email newsletter so I can keep you posted as to new content coming online and what's going on and where I'm going to be doing presentations. Then check out the Pitmaster Club. You can do a free 30-day trial. We don't ask for a credit card. Just check it out, and I think you'll be pleased. And you get a free ebook when you try it. And if you got any questions, best place to reach me is post questions on AmazingRibs.com, not on Mark Zuckerberg's website or Elon Musk's website, on my site. Come to my site and post your questions there, and I'll try to answer you. And if I can't, my talented team will. So, thank you. Oh, Steve Ford says there's a book called Why We Sleep, and it covers the chocolate thing. Ooh, that's interesting. Steve, you look an awful lot like Alton Brown. Thank you for the tip, Steve. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Save up your questions for next month, or come to AmazingRibs.com and ask them there. And we'll see you here next month. Same time, same station.
That's all for now, folks. Thanks for staying awake, and please visit AmazingRibs.com for the articles, recipes, and reviews mentioned in this chat with the Barbecue Whisperer and Hedonism Evangelist from AmazingRibs.com, the planet's biggest and baddest barbecue and grilling website, Meathead.
It's a game.